Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar here at Blossom LGBT, which is going to be all about managing job stress and dissatisfaction in the workplace. My name is Meike Sang, and I'm the Member Services Manager here at Blossom. And before I pass the mic over to our fantastic host for today, I just really want to firstly say thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be here with us, especially for this much needed topic, because we here at Blossom, we are an organization that exists to support and empower young LGBT plus adults to succeed in all aspects of life, be it social, professional, etc. And for today's webinar, we're going to be focusing a little bit more on the latter. So as we have collectively seen a rise of attacks towards the LGBT plus community, we believe that now is truly it's the time more than ever to provide you with the tools and support to give you what you need to be able to navigate these challenging situations, especially at the workplace. That's why we're super excited to be collaborating with our host today. So over to you, Melly.
Thank you, Meike. Thank you very much. Thanks for hosting me. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I really like working with Blossom. This is my second webinar with you people, and it means a lot for me to be here and try to be part of the upskilling program for young queer folks in the workforce. So without further ado, I'm just gonna go ahead and start. Today's webinar is about managing job stress and dissatisfaction at the workplace, as Meike has introduced. A little bit of me. My name is Mohamad Ali or Mali. I can go with both names. I use he, him pronouns. Something about me that I have recently discovered is that I have unconsciously used my ADHD brain to bridge multiple fields together. I technically work at the intersection of education, psychology, and inclusion. I have an academic background in clinical psychology and mental health. I'm also a teacher in a special needs school. I do some psychology research on the side, mainly about well-being in the workplace, body image in queer men, mainly focused on queer men cross-culturally. I am also part of the Lebanese Psychological Association. I have been the assistant director of the Gender and Sexuality Division since last year, where we have been preparing and delivering free sexual orientation and gender identity trainings and workshops for workers, employers, and students. And I am also a member of the British Psychological Society. What you will take away from this session is a cluster of techniques to manage and reduce the stress that you might experience in the workplace. You will learn some practical methods for coping with your dissatisfaction at the job, whether it's a toxic environment or you are starting to reach your burnout. Through these tools, you will also learn to build your emotional resilience. You will be able to strengthen your emotional well-being and stay focused to fulfill your work duties during stressful times. And at the end of all of this, you're also going to be increasing your repertoire of tools, and that would immensely help you with gaining a growth mindset. So I love statistics. I'm a statistician. I do a lot of research. So I'm going to start with some statistics. And why is this webinar important? In the general population, irrespective of gender identity and sexual orientation, 1 in 4 workers here in the UK feel that their job has negatively impacted their mental health and physical health as well. And there's another 1 in 4 as well here in the UK who have experienced at least one form of conflict or abuse at work. And by abuse, it can vary from discrimination, victimization, microaggression, violence, and so on. And if we look more into the LGBTQ plus community, among those who are working, we jump to a way higher odds of experiencing such discrimination and harassment. 1 in 2 LGBTQ plus workers have experienced at least one form of bullying or harassment at work. And if we're just looking at the statistics for trans folks, this goes up to 4 in 5 of them. And that is alarmingly high. 2 in 5 of LGBTQ plus workers have also experienced offensive jokes and banter in the workplace, whether it's a joke directed at them or just witnessing people having a chat and making derogatory jokes about queer people. Another 3 out of 10 have experienced homophobic, biphobic, and transphobic remarks directed at them or made in their presence. And this even goes to the extent of 2 in 5 trans individuals getting dead named in their workplace deliberately, which just makes the environment even more and more unsafe for those people. And 2 in 10 out of those workers experience verbal abuse as well, directed at them or in their presence. You have 1 in 10 that are exposed to colleagues using stereotypes and making them uncomfortable. And in terms of all of this exposure to harassment and discrimination, this affects queer people, specifically young ones aged between 18 and 24. It affects their perception of their career progression and their professional development. And unfortunately, 1 in 3 of them felt that their gender and or sexual identity negatively impacts their long-term career and that it's gonna be an obstacle to them progressing in a fair way throughout their professional journey. Another set of statistics, there's a recent systematic review which was conducted by Pereira et al. A total number of participants was over 8,000 LGBTQ plus workers, and technically they compared LGBTQ plus workers to heterosexual counterparts, and queer people were significantly higher on levels of burnout, levels of engagement, how low that level of engagement is in their workplace, their occupational self-efficacy, which means how much they believe they can fulfill the duties of their job efficiently. Their depression and anxiety rates are higher, suicidal ideation and attempts, substance misuse, and those were just from cross-sectional studies. Some of the common causes of stress at work and some job dissatisfaction can include direct workplace discrimination, lack of control over one's workload, high demands on time and energy, feeling that you don't have enough time to do things at home, alone, or with your friends or loved ones. There's a lack of clarity about responsibilities. There is also, this goes hand in hand with low support from your line manager and sometimes borderline abusive relationship there. Some difficult relationships with colleagues, being underpaid, limited career growth at an organization, whether it's because of lack of funding or because of unfair practices that are being maintained by processes, legal and organizational ones. Lack of work-life balance as well, internalized stigma, and other factors to consider are life experiences, upbringing, and environment. Because each worker, when they go to work, they have a set belief that is the fruit of all of their life experiences. So different interactions in the workplace might trigger different emotions in different people. So that's why it's always important to take this into consideration as well. And in terms of internalized stigma, this is where we're going to head next, which is the sexual and gender minority stress models. So the most prominent models of looking at the mental health and the mental well-being of queer people are those two models, and they involve some distal stressors and proximal stressors. And by distal stressors, we mean things that happened outside of one's control. It happens outside of their mind. It's an event. It is objective, and it has happened outside of our thoughts or emotions. And that is based on sexual and gender identity. Can include discrimination, rejection, victimization, and can also go to physical and sexual violence. So one of them is individual discrimination, and it's a kind of discrimination that is experienced on a one-to-one basis or from a group of people towards one individual. And this can be perceived both objectively and subjectively. Another type of prejudice event is structural discrimination, and that is the set of policies and legislations, practices that are restricting the minority group, and they're placing them at a disadvantage compared to the dominant group, which is the heterosexuals. Another type of prejudice events, which is the most prominent one, is microaggressions, which is direct and indirect comments or actions that are made, sometimes unintentionally, and they convey some stereotypical and negative beliefs about those minoritized groups. And it also infirms some kind of inferiority of this group compared to heterosexual groups. And just like I mentioned, the harassment, victimization, and physical, emotional, or sexual abuse are also experienced objectively and subjectively. And when we move from the objective or distal stressors, everything from the outside, we then move to how we navigate the world through our lens and how our psyche formed and is maintained because of those prejudice events. And this is what we mean by proximal stressors. One of them is outness and concealment. There is always a constant effort to hide one's identity, sometimes even concealing it from oneself, because admitting to belong to a certain minoritized group might also mean believing all of the stereotypes or all of the negative connotations and comments that society has placed on that group. And there's a big element of guilt and shame in that. And there's also the mere fact that it's not always safe to be out. And unfortunately, it's safer to conceal one's sexual or gender identity in certain places. Could be at home, at work, in society, at school, you name it. Another thing in terms of proximal stressors is the self-stigma or the internalized homophobia or transphobia. And this is technically the outcome of growing up in a society that looks at this group as an inferior group or a group that is innately wrong. And people just internalize those beliefs and start believing them themselves. And this constant belief of the negative or heterosexist beliefs, in addition to constantly having to hide one's identity to prevent prejudice events from happening, leads to constant monitoring of the environment and expectations of rejection and discrimination. People are always on the lookout for any kind of discrimination that they might get from people. And that just is a vicious cycle that keeps on running around. And it's also worth mentioning that all of those microaggressions and prejudice events happen at an intersectional lens. Sometimes people have intersecting identities and they are discriminated against for both or more than two identities or facets of an identity, which could be race and ethnicity, class, nationality, ability. People can be very creative in the way they discriminate and harass other people. And I wanted to start with the gender and sexuality stress model because when I'm going to be talking now about job stress, I want you just to take into consideration all of the minority stressors that we just mentioned, in addition to the usual job stress that any worker would go through. And this is why it's very important for us to focus on marginalized communities, especially those who have different sexual orientations or gender identities, especially with everything going on politically here in the UK and in the whole world. Stress can be positive sometimes. Everyone faces pressure at work. Positive stress can motivate you to do more or better or to just finish the task that you're doing. Too much pressure, however, can become stressful and it can affect your levels of happiness and your quality of life, can lead to anxiety and other mental and physical health problems. And because work usually takes a big chunk of one's day, if those hours of work are stressful, then we're being exposed to, let's say, between 6 and 8 hours of stress a day. And that just spills outside of work every day. And it's just a vicious cycle because the more you feel stressed outside of work, the less recharged you're going to feel. And the more you're going to dread going back to work. And you're going to go back to work dreading the fact that you did not get to rest. And then it goes on and on and on. And something that we use very often in CBT is Padesky's 5 areas framework. And I try to tailor it for job stress because this framework can be used literally to any problem that you are facing or any kind of stress that you are facing. And technically, to understand job stress, we have to understand stress in general. Because if you're experiencing stress at work, you might be experiencing changes in the way you work and the ways you think and the way you feel. And all of those thoughts, feelings, and actions, they are intertwined and they affect each other. So technically, if your mood is low, it's gonna probably affect your physiology because you're gonna feel more tired, you're gonna feel more unenergetic, demotivated. And this in return will impact your thoughts. You're gonna be thinking, when will I ever be able to do this? Why can't I just finish my work on time? Why can't I feel like I belong at work? And then this will impact your behaviors, such as avoiding people, avoiding certain situations. And then all of those factors are constantly affecting one another. And they're all happening within a bigger environment and situation, which is the workplace. I'm going to walk through some examples of each of those areas. So starting with mood. Job stress and the mood. Some of the symptoms are feeling withdrawn, feeling a decreased drive and motivation to initiate, maintain, or finish tasks, or even to go to work. There's a lot of heightened emotional reactions, and by heightened emotional reactions, we mean higher compared to the baseline that you had, or out of proportion to the situation, getting way more tearful, sensitive, or aggressive during times that do not need those kind of reactions. And there's also feeling sad or anxious before, during, and after work hours, which can spill to after work. And like I mentioned earlier, it just goes on and on and on. Thoughts. We tend to use different cognitive filters or some thought traps. Some of them are heightened in certain situations. Some of them are more readily available depending on our past experiences. But generally speaking, when people who face a lot of stressful situations and feel that they do not get the proper support, will tend to indulge in one of or more of those cognitive filters. One of them is black or white thinking, which is technically all or nothing. I'm either going to submit this proposal ahead of the deadline, not even on the day of the deadline, and it's going to be perfect. And the funding that we are requesting is going to be accepted, and we're going to get £500,000 for a 3-year project. Or I'm not going to even think to submit it. Because if I don't do that, then I am incompetent at my work. Catastrophizing, jumping to the worst case scenarios or jumping to conclusions without considering all of the facts and all of the possible conclusions and discussions that you could have had with different people before jumping to that particular assumption. And usually catastrophizing is just about extreme negative outcomes. There's the negative lens or filter, which is technically us focusing mainly on the negatives and discrediting all of the positives, which could minimize successes and just focus on the challenges and all of the setbacks that we face at work. That also leads to maximizing some of the problems we face. We make them much bigger than they are, and we just focus on that, discrediting all the positives, making that problem bigger, taking up the space in the room, leaving even less space to see the positives. And they go hand in hand together. And another thing in terms of thoughts is that we tend to hold ourselves responsible for negative outcomes, whereas we probably did very well in that particular task or meeting or presentation. Another aspect or area of Tedeschi's model is behaviors. It's when anxiety or stress starts interfering with avoiding certain tasks, people, or meetings. That means taking extra time off of work, working through holidays, working for longer hours, preferring to work at home just for the sake of avoiding people, all while stressing at the same time about the quality of your work and about the efficiency that you have and the belief in yourself that you have to complete the work properly. Another kind of behavior is the actions and the words that you say, whether it's something that you're initiating or reacting to. And actions and words that are not said can also be considered here behavior, because thoughts, or what we call in CBT hot thoughts, are emotionally charged thoughts, and they can lead to triggers and to actions and consequences as much as any other behavior would do. And this is why sometimes here thoughts can also be considered a behavior. Fourth area is our physiological state. When we get stressed, we get the typical fight or flight response. People vary from in the level of flight or fight response symptoms. Some of them just experience very light symptomologies, where others feel the full-blown thing. They would feel faster heartbeat, faster breathing, their muscles would tense up, and it just adds on to the other areas. The more you breathe or the higher your heart rate, the more you might conclude that, oh, there's something wrong within your body. You're experiencing something and you're not able to pinpoint it. And that could improve your mood, which makes it even worse, leads to more avoidance leads to more heightened state, etc., etc., etc. And this is where I would introduce the clock clogs. Usually what we do is we take all of those symptoms of each area and we have a look at them as one big clock. They are all interdependent. All of them are working at the same time. When one is moving fast, it's going to fasten all of the other ones. And the slower one moves, the more likely that the rest are going to go slower and slower. So let's say a symptom from the mood area is being triggered. It is interdependent with another thought symptom, and that one is also related to a physiology symptom, to an environment symptom, and so and so and so. And it's this big clock that you're constantly trying to manage, which is your mental well-being. And there are those small little cycles constantly playing and turning around. And those are the maintaining cycles of what keeps us stressed at work and what prohibits us from seeing any progress. And this is where a lot of intervention and coping skills fall into. It's tackling those mini maintaining cycles, which we will get back to in a bit. Just wanted to share some definitions as well and some indicators for us to test. Job dissatisfaction, it's not just having a single bad day. It's when you're constantly feeling dreadful, depleted, and disengaged from your workplace. There's always this recurrent feelings, and they have common forms, one of them being burnout, which is overload of work, bore out, which is underload, and you have toxic climates, which includes direct victimization and bullying. And unfortunately, it's not usually the case that we have just one form of job dissatisfaction. You can take elements of each form and mix them, which is not the best thing to experience. And all of this is also happening within a background of sexual and gender minority stress, because anything related to those identities can add pressure and amplify those job distress and burnout rates. And by burnout, what we mean by burnout is not a medical condition. It's not medical. What the World Health Organization call burnout is more of an occupational phenomenon, and it's just a mix of symptoms that results from chronic workplace stress. And there, the effect of burnout is sometimes as detrimental as any other disorder, both psychological or medical or health, because medical is psychology, but that's for another topic. And burning out can spill out easily from the workplace to the other areas of your life. And there are three main indicators for burning out. One is your levels of energy, how depleted, how exhausted you constantly feel, not just at work, but after work, before work, while you're doing other activities. The distance you place yourself at vis-a-vis your work, how mentally distant you are from your work, how indifferent you are, how pessimistic or negative you are in your kind of thinking towards it. There's also this sense of cynicism, which is very important in burnout, which is expecting that the worst is going to happen. And because of your distance and your indifference to it, you're constantly expecting the worst to happen or the worst from people, all while not really caring for the consequences of those things, because you have kind of given up on caring about this field in your work. And there's the third indicator, which is efficacy, how much you feel that you can fulfill your job properly, how much you can do your work properly, if you are fit to do the work in the first place, all inside your cognitive lens and perception of your abilities. And just like any other cycle, this one also feeds on itself. The more emotionally exhausted you are, the worse your mental health symptoms are going to be. And the worse your mental health symptoms everywhere, not just in the workplace, the worse you're going to feel at work. And the worse you're going to feel at work, the more you're going to feel emotionally exhausted. And it just goes on and on until you find an intervention point. And this is where we jump to our resilience toolkit. And those are the coping tools that we will be learning to do together. I prepared 5 big resilience tools, and I prepared a list of small tools that you can use on a daily basis as well, in addition to those big ones. The first one is called the traffic light self-audit. And it technically takes the same process of a traffic light: red, amber, green. Red being this thing is harmful consistently and it's blocking my progress. If something is in the red, it means most probably I have to act this week to make it better. If something is in the amber zone, it means I'm doing it well, I'm managing well, but I do feel drained at the end. And that means that we can do some tweaks to our strategies or how we deal or navigate this task at work or this situation. And when it's green, that's great. We keep it, no action. It means it's good, low strain on your physical and mental well-being. It's energizing, actually. And we just want more of it, technically. And we're going to use those 3 lights or 3 categories of action plans when we're assessing the 4 big dimensions of work. Because sometimes we do feel stressed and we do feel overwhelmed and even burnt out without even knowing what we are stressed about. And a lot of people would say, yes, you should reflect on what's going on. But if we don't have the proper tools to reflect and to identify the things that are stressing us, it actually can make it worse, because it's like what I like to call vomiting my mind, but in a never-ending way. So I would just use this simple technique to work on each of the domains. And the 4 domains are technically the tasks that you're expected to do. This is the workload that is given to you, the workload that is given in general to other workers, the clarity of the instructions, and the fit to strengths, how much you are actually able to do those tasks without further development or further trainings, what areas you need to develop, what areas you can help other people in. Because at the end, the more you help, not the more, but you can help others and get help depending on this light, whether it's green or red or amber. And this also would increase the social cohesion within an organization, and it would strengthen the bonds between each other for the most part. The other domain is the actors. And by actors, we mean people such as your line managers, their line managers, other colleagues, some parents, clients, pupils, if you are in a teaching setting. And on top of all this, there's also the governance, which is how the organization runs, whether it's the admin policies, meetings, how the HR functions, which systems, is it a private or a public governing body? And the actual place itself is another dimension, because it can vary from working at home, in the office, it's a mix. Your work environment can be noisy, or you have to travel a long time to get there. You have to buy a lot of equipment and take them with you. And just reflecting on those 4 helps, because it addresses the demands and resources. And it's not just what you can do to make it better or to cope better. It makes you more aware of the job design, of the organizational design, what the job can actually offer, what the organization can also offer you. Because sometimes, yes, we do feel the stress, and sometimes it's very subjective and personalized, but a lot of time it's also because of other things from the organization that are not dealt with. And this kind of reflection also helps you in deciding what to work on. So for each dimension or framework, ask yourself, In terms of tasks, am I happy with the workload? Do I feel that my responsibilities are clear? Do I feel like I can do the work without a lot of help? Can I be very independent? And I just think if it's not really the case and I'm struggling a lot and it's affecting my progress in all other areas of work, then I would put a red on it. Amber, it's fine, but draining. Green, like I said, good, keep on going. And you do that for the same thing for actors, governance, and the place, the ones that we just talked about. And by the end of this reflection session, you would have a potential action plan of what is green, what is amber, what is red. And if you have more than red, one red, or let's start with having one that is red, then that should be prioritized. Because the more you feel blocked, the more you feel harmed at work, the more it's going to damage other areas of your work. So prioritize the one in red. And if there are more than one red, then prioritize whichever can have changes in it quicker. If you work on two things that are in the red zone, one of them you can see the results in 2 weeks, and the other you can see the results in, let's say, 2 months. I would say start on the one that you would see the results of in 2 weeks, because the more you see the results, the more motivation you would feel, and the more likely you are to enhance your resilience tools and use them more often. The resilience tool number 2 is assessing our burnout level. The first one was more about understanding what is stressing us out. And this one is more about, okay, did I reach a burnout level? Or am I almost there? Because prevention is the best intervention. But still, when we're burnt out, there are different ways that we can cope with. But I would use the same traffic light method for the 3 big indicators of burning out. One being energy, in terms of how depleted, how exhausted am I? Is the depletion of my energy or internal social battery blocking my progress? Is it manageable but getting drained easily, or is it good, energized, and keeps me going? I would put the color or the category. Same thing for the distance, because the more distance I put between myself and my job, the less personal it feels and the less meaningful it would be for me. So assessing that distance that I have placed myself in is also very beneficial to know what to tackle next. Efficacy, how much I believe that my job performance is effective or not, whether my work outcomes are reduced or increased. And I would use the same triangulation or prioritization technique. Whichever is red, I would tackle it first so that I can recharge my battery and I can prevent as much as possible and as quickly as possible a burnout. Because getting into the burnout is a very tricky area. And sometimes people can just jump back from it, bounce back from it very easily. And other people can sometimes linger there for a while. And it also depends on the job field that you are working with, because each burnout differs from another. And after you prioritize which one you want to work on, this is where we slow down the clock that we talked about. Just to reiterate what I said earlier about the clock, different symptoms of our mood or our mood presentations affect different presentations of our physiological state, our behaviors, thoughts, and the environment. All of those things constantly intertwined. I have reflected on where I stand vis-a-vis those things or those presentation, and I now get to decide what to focus on. And realistically speaking, I would want to choose one symptom to work on at a time. And because it's a big clock that we are working with, all of our thoughts, all of our emotions, all of the connections we have with different people, all of our activities, the meetings, whatnot. If we just work on one clock of the clock at a time, and we slow that maintaining cycle just a little tiny bit, all of the other clogs will get reduced. Their speed is going to reduce, even if it's slightly, but it will reduce, because the faster the clock runs, the more the anxiety and the stress is running you rather than you having control over your work. And the more agency you have over your thoughts, over the stress that you're experiencing, the more or the better you are at dealing and navigating those conflicts. Choosing one thing at a time, it will slow down the others, and you technically cannot realistically target everything that triggers and maintains your stress. I wish we could. I wish I could. But we have to prioritize and just focus on one thing at a time. An example here would be, I'm just going to turn away the slides here. An example would be, for example, our physiological state. If we are feeling a bit stressed because my line manager, let's say, is giving me some negative feedback, and I've received or witnessed some kind of microaggression about queer individuals doing stereotypically one kind of behavior. On the spot, I would try to think of one thing that I can target that would slow down the whole cycle. And if I am to choose physiology or the body state, I can, for example, focus on breathing, like going back to the basics, doing some belly or diaphragmatic breathings, which is when we're inhaling, feeling our tummy feeling our tummy expand, and sitting with that feeling, just feeling every sensation of the belly going, expanding, and then going back in. And you can just do it your own way. Some people like to do a 4x4x4 technique, which is inhale for 4 seconds, keep it for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds. Others like to do 5-5-4. I personally like to put the last one as the longest, because when we are breathing out, we are activating what we call the parasympathetic nervous system. And that part of our brain is technically the area of the brain that allows us to calm down and to regulate our emotions. That's why breathing out or exhaling, sometimes even with a sigh, is very calming physiologically, because it triggers the brain to calm down. Obviously, while keeping the inhale and pause at the same time. Because if you just exhale or take a deep breath quickly and exhale quickly, it's going to make you more stressed and anxious. So targeting one aspect of physiology is going to reduce the speed of which my thoughts are running during that meeting, and it's just going to go on and on and on. It's going to be easier for me to tackle the situation itself. And this brings us to challenging unhelpful thoughts. We are human, and we hold on very tightly to some of our beliefs and some perceptions we have of ourselves and of others or of situations. And those are the thought traps that I was talking about earlier, or the cognitive fallacies and filters. And something that I do personally, and I would encourage you to do, is to just find a PDF version or a Word document version on the internet. There are plenty. Just type cognitive fallacies and filters and keep it with you, whether it's printed, digital form, on the laptop, on your desk, if you feel that you engage in some of those things. And what you want to do when you're challenging those unhelpful thoughts is look at instances that disprove or discredit some of the negative absolute conclusions that you have jumped to. And this is what we mean by challenging unhelpful thoughts or cognitive restructuring, because it allows you to wipe the lens from which you see the world and just try to focus a bit on the other positives. Some of the cognitive filters are jumping to conclusions, personalizing, mind reading, tunnel vision, maximizing and minimizing, and so on. There are plenty of cognitive fallacies, so it might be a bit of a rabbit hole, but just stick to the basics, I would say. And we have more time, so we're gonna go through this case example of challenging unhelpful thoughts. There is a scenario, let's say your manager sends you an email 40 minutes before you go home saying, can we talk at 10 tomorrow? And an automatic thought would be, sugar, I'm in trouble. This could be disciplinary. Yeah, it's gonna be bad. So what we would do in this instance to challenge the unhelpful thoughts is have a baseline. And to have a baseline is to actually rate our emotions and look at that thought that popped into our mind and the other emotions that have been triggered alongside of it. And let's say there was a lot of anxiety, shame, and dread that I felt in that particular sentence or particular thought. I would give it a 10, like an 8 over 10 rating, 6 over 10, 7 over 10, whatever you feel is accurate of your emotions. And then look at the cognitive fallacies document and try to think, which filter are you using when you are having that automatic thought? Are you catastrophizing and assuming the worst? Probably. When we say that, oh, it's going to be very bad, I think it's disciplinary. Maybe they're going to tell me that I haven't done my work properly. They're going to tell me that they want to not consider or reject my request for a promotion or for a salary increase whatsoever. There's also a mind reading element that we're doing here because we're trying to tell what the manager is thinking about, and fortune telling, trying to see in advance what the conversation is going to look like, what it's going to be about, and what are the outcomes or prospective outcomes of that meeting. And this also goes in hand with our selective attention, just focusing more and more on the negatives and just disconfirming, discrediting all of the positives that we have done at work. And this is the same case example. After seeing which cognitive fallacies we have been entrenched in, it's time to look for evidence to either confirm this belief or to discredit it. Let's say the evidence for the automatic thought are, I actually made 2 small errors this week, and this message is short and unspecific. Those are just facts. I am not thinking or jumping to conclusions with those sentences. Whereas the evidence against, or they're just alternative data, is last time the message was this brief, when the message was this brief, it was a positive update. I solved something this morning and I already received the thanks in the morning. And if it were disciplinary, maybe HR would be involved and it would be a more formal setting. Oh, but also my one-to-one meeting about that project was supposed to happen last week and we rain checked it. So it's probably about that. And after seeing the pros and cons, or the evidence for and the evidence against, we get into a new balanced alternative thought. This could be a routine or mixed feedback. If there is a concern, I can handle it with the facts that I have prepared. And based on that new balanced alternative thought, you start crafting and implementing your plan and behavioral strategy, which is replying, happy to meet tomorrow at 10. What's on the agenda so I can prepare? Because the more prepared you are, the better you are to engage in that conversation, both professionally and efficiently. And at the end, another small reflective practice is to re-rate your emotions and to see that after reframing those beliefs and thoughts, you felt better afterwards. And I know this sounds like it's too much, and the first couple of times it will be too much if you haven't tried this before, but with practice, it's going to become as automatic as the negative automatic thoughts. The key here is to be willing to challenge yourself. And the last resilience tool is to speak up, discuss, and report. According to the Equality Act, the government, you are protected from discrimination in the workplace. And you're technically protected when it comes to discrimination based on protected characteristics, including sex, gender reassignment as well, marital status, race, etc. I'm not an expert in the legalities of this, but there's a webinar through Blossom as well, which was given by Safa, called What Are Your Queer Rights? It's a very nice webinar. Thank you, Safa, for that. And I used this vicarious liability from it. And it's technically the responsibility that your employer has for taking steps if any kind of discrimination happens in the workplace. They are, by law, responsible to take steps. And it apparently differs between a private and a public sector. This is why I'm saying I'm not really a professional in the legalities of it, but you can always report if needs be. Another strategy I would say when you're speaking up and discussing some of the things that have happened is to discuss, don't attack. When you're talking about it with that person who has said the comment, let's say that person told you, oh, you're very assertive for a person like you. You might feel a bit hurt. You might feel like they don't believe you belong in this organization. Your skills are not worth staying in this organization. And if you feel safe enough to talk to this person, preferably use the premises of how you felt during that situation rather than you did this because you are XYZ and that made me feel da because you are like that, because you have done that. And this just breeds more and more and more conflict. And the key here is to get to a proper conversation where we can see positive results. And if you want to report it to your line manager and HR, ask for their guidance as well. And something that I use here as well is check for how they're dealing with the situation, what they are doing to prevent this or to sanction whoever did that. And this will tell you a lot about the culture of the organization and how safe you should actually, or you can feel, or how threatened you have to feel to protect yourself from an organization that does not actually have the best benefit or your best benefits in mind. So their response is also another answer for you. Even if it's not the answer you want to hear, it's always an indication of something else. Those were the big 5 coping tools. Just gonna go through these couple of tools that boost your energy. Wear clothes that make you feel comfortable, even if you're working from home. If that means not working in bed, working on a desk with your full clothes on, shirt, trousers, even if it's very formal, and no cameras included, but it makes you feel more confident and comfortable or put you in the space to work, do it. Do whatever works for you as long as you're not hurting anyone else or trespassing your professional boundaries. When you question your abilities at work and your self-esteem, remind yourself that you have actually earned this job. This job was not offered to you out of nowhere. You had to apply, and through the job applications, there was the CV crafting, cover letter, the application document, sometimes some case studies, the interview process, references, probation, and you made it. They want you at the workplace because they see your added value or your potential. So just remind yourself that you're there because you earned it, because of your hard work and because of your skill set, not because it was just there out of nowhere. Proper sleep hygiene. Disrupting your sleep cycle can affect a lot of your moods and thoughts. So if you can just try your best to maintain a good sleep hygiene, consistent time to go to bed, consistent time to wake up, small ritual before going to bed just to prepare your mind to go to bed, that would help maintain the remainings of the sanities that you have because of the burnout. Micro affirmations is like small encouragement that you can have about sometimes very mundane things, such as, oh, I had a good interaction with one of the clients today, and that is enough. Just small micro affirmation. And this goes literally, it's the opposite of microaggression, but micro affirmation is more internal. And you can also give it to other people in terms of compliments. Just compliment some of their achievements. Joining communities, support groups, and unions can help a lot as well, because most people there would have either had similar experiences or been exposed or heard to people having dealt with similar situations. So that can help a lot. And last one is to set boundaries and to switch off, especially if you work from home. Try to have a specific timing for when your work ends and when your work starts, and just try not to merge both worlds together, because it can get quite messy and you would feel that work never ends, because technically it never will if you keep on mixing them together. And that's about it. I hope the coping tools and the explanations of why these coping tools I gave are beneficial to you and could help you make sense of the stress that you might be feeling or navigating them in a better way. Those are some of the resources and signposting in case you would like to reach out to someone or an entity or a governing entity. Other than that, thank you very much for listening, and thank you, Blossom, for having me. And if there are any questions, please feel free.
All right, thank you so much, Mali. Really appreciate it. I was just reflecting myself as you were kind of going through all the resilience tools and the coping tools. And I think the one that really stood out to me, I think it was really helpful when you provided the case study example of especially when you had the automatic thought and how we can actually go with the thought and actually, okay, what about this feels true? And then stacking the evidence for and against and actually starting to give ourselves the opportunity to reframe, well, actually, what if? And then providing that different thought and actually seeing like, I felt an immediate sense of calm once the reframe was there. And I thought, oh, this is it's very fascinating. And
Glad to hear that.
yes, and I love the simplicity of using the traffic light system, both for when you are self-auditing yourself and actually like kind of like before you've reached a point of burnout, and actually what to do if you are in burnout, and different methods of communication of like how we would actually go about resolving that, and with the coping tools as well, when you're having low self-esteem days. So it actually reminds me of something that a work colleague of mine in a different profession told me about accumulating what she likes to call a yay file. So on the days when you're feeling low, you go to your yay file, and this yay file is filled of screenshots of lovely messages, testimonials, just anything that has made you feel good in that moment, because we are very quick to dismiss ourselves with our achievements and the things that we have done well, and it's very easy to forget them. So actually having a place where you have concrete evidence. No, so when those automatic thoughts come, that actually here's plenty of proof that that is not true. So I really loved seeing those coping tools as well. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your experiences, and just some really practical things for us to walk away with. So just want to say thank you to you, Melly, and for everybody who has joined us today. Thank you so, so much for joining us, because we appreciate each and every one of you. For all of the links that was mentioned in today's webinar, I'll be sure to pop that in the description. So all the resources, and thank you very much for pointing to one of our other Blossom webinars about our queer rights. That's really appreciated. So I'll be sure to pop the link to that webinar, as well as your own, to stay connected with you on LinkedIn and your Gmail, everything you signposted, and all of the resources as well. I really appreciate that. So for everybody who's interested in those, I'll be sure to put that in the description box around this video. So just a quick, just a little shameless plug here. So as we mentioned, like, this webinar is brought to you by Blossom LGBT. So if you or if someone you know might be interested in receiving further support with developing your professional skills for the workplace on a one-on-one basis, we do have a free service. It's our Blossom mentorship scheme, and that's when you actually work with me one-on-one, and basically I matchmake you professionally, not romantically. I professionally matchmake you with an industry mentor who can help support you with your unique journey onto whichever pathway that you're looking to get to in the workplace. And so if you are interested in that, you can head to our website, blossom.lgbt, and head on to our mentoring section, where you can find out some more information and apply. This is a free service for young LGBT adults between the ages of 16 to 30. So if you are within that range and you are looking for that support, we are more than happy to have a conversation with you to see if you are a fit for that. Okay. And so if you enjoyed this webinar today, just know that we do have plenty that we have ran in the past, and for any upcoming events, do check us out on Eventbrite. Just look for Blossom LGBT CIC, and then you'll be able to see anything that we have upcoming online, as well as in person, especially for our in-person workshops in Guildford. Check us out on social media, on LinkedIn, on Instagram. We're all at Blossom LGBT, so I hope to see you there. So thank you so much once again, and we hope to see you next time. Okay, bye for now.